Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. I thought that, I wondered if just right off the bat, if you could explain what monkey mind means.
Monkey mind is a Buddhist term for the mind that won't stop moving, like monkeys that swing from a vine and start screeching and throwing their feces. My mind throws feces. It's a Buddhist term, so I came across it in my travels and my attempts to sit still, my unsuccessful attempts to sit still, and thought that it was just perfectly evocative of the anxious mind, and I thought I'd steal it, because the Buddhists, they don't care if you steal things from them.
They don't really care about possessions.
They don't really care. They just take these
That is
terms.
an opportunity that I never considered.
Yeah, you should go through all the Buddhist terminology and see what you can steal. They'll give it right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a friend who's a Buddhist, and I'm going to take his Porsche. Well, and it was interesting. You wrote an article for the New York Times where you said this: Buddhism was made for the anxious, like Christianity was made for the downtrodden, or AA for the addicted. Can you explain what that meant?
Well, I don't know if this is true in Vietnam or Thailand, but if you've ever gone to a Zen center on the East Coast, or specifically in Brooklyn where I live, there was some neurotic people in there. I mean, they've gone there for the same reason that people become therapists. The apologies to anyone who's a therapist out there.
Yeah.
Because they're really familiar with neurosis and misery, and they want to feel better so badly. And so they go and they become Buddhists to feel better, but you can still tell. Look them in the eye, and they're still a little haunted.
It's still under there.
Maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Well, and your mother was a psychologist,
My mother is a psychotherapist.
Psychotherapist.
Yes, is a psychotherapist. Yeah.
And she actually had patients. Her office was in your house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When we were growing up, the family den where we used to kind of horse around, my brothers and I, became when I was, I think, around 10 or 11, a clinic essentially where she would see patients. And there was a vent that went from the room where she saw patients directly to, it's awesome, and directly to, there's a vent right by where my father kept his Playboys, we discovered, I discovered these things at around the same time. They were both revelations to me. In his nightstand, there was in his bedroom, and I used to go up there because my mother had stolen the place that I loved. And I used to listen to my mother's sessions with really upset suburban women.
Yeah. What was the most, memorable thing that you remember hearing?
I wish I could say something that was dramatic, but they were all pretty much the same. My husband makes me mad.
That sounds pretty accurate.
But I learned a great deal from that.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I wanted I'm glad that I had that repetition, that lesson over and over again when I was a kid.
It's helping you now.
It hasn't helped me in the least.
Oh.
But it should have, and I'm glad that it happened.
Well, you've grown up with anxiety from a very young age.
Yes.
When was the point that you realized this isn't just me being nervous, there's something amiss?
Yeah. Well, this is, the book starts this way, with the loss of my virginity, in a way that shouldn't have made me terribly anxious, because I was 16 and I lost my virginity to two women in their 20s, lesbian women. Well, not totally lesbian, I suppose.
Right, probably bisexual.
Probably bisexual, but professedly homosexual, older women, and this should have been awesome.
Right.
But on paper, it was the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. But it just consumed me with anxiety overnight. I just became someone who could not stop worrying about everything that was going to go wrong. And I came home from that trip. It was on a road trip. I was 16, and I was smoking a lot of pot, and I was going upstate New York to go see Fish. I'm sorry. I'm so much better now than I was at that point. But that's what I was doing. There's no getting around it. I've confessed it already in print. Mm-hmm. And I had this wonderful sexual opportunity, and instead of making me happy, it made me mentally ill. So I got home, and first thing I did was I told my mother, who started screaming, "You were raped! You were statutory raped!" Which,
you
again,
were, technically.
I was technically, but it was not pleasant to hear that.
Oh, to hear
Or
it.
to be the person who tells his mother about
Sure.
about losing his virginity to two older women. The first
Can I
thing
ask,
he gets home.
why'd you do that?
I was really sad and scared.
Yeah, and she was the appropriate person, I guess, to tell when you're...
No,
yeah.
no, that's not true. She was the only one who was home when I returned home. She was upstairs folding laundry, and she was the first kind face I saw. And
Yeah.
I'm a Jewish kid from Long Island. I needed my mommy. I have nothing. Again, I'm a much better person now.
Yeah.
I don't listen to Fish. I don't tell my mother about my sex life. I don't do any of that anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting because you spend a lot of the book talking about what was the origin, and that you really tried to figure out for a long time what the origin of your anxiety was. You had a drowning incident when you were a kid.
Near drowning.
Near drowning. Sorry, you are not dead.
No.
You're not dead currently, which we're all very happy about, by the way.
Sometimes I wonder.
Exactly. But you spent so much time trying to figure out where this came from, and
Yes.
you had this great therapist toward the end of the book who said something really great to you about that. I thought about the fire. He talked about a fire, you being in a burning house.
Yeah, well, I was expressing to him the theory that I had, which was which I still hold to some extent, which is that it was my mother's fault, and I kept saying we need to talk about what happened. We need to talk about my mother and how crazy she is and all these things that they did to me, including the lovely lesbians or near lesbians, and my mother. And he said, "Listen, you're in pain, right? At the very moment you're in pain." I said, "Yes." He goes, "And it feels like you're in a house and the house is on fire." I said, "That's exactly what it feels like. Thank you so much." And he said, "And you're panicking because you need to get out of that house on fire." And I said, "Yes, that's exactly. Thank you for understanding." He said, "Well, why are you trying to figure out what caused the fire? Shouldn't the first thing you do be to put the fire out?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's probably true."
So, I mean...
and that from that moment forward was when I started just a little bit to get less crazy.
Well, that's the thing. It really felt like it was this therapist and also your wife. I mean, you say in the book that falling in love with your wife helped to quiet your mind by distracting you from yourself. You call her a living...
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You call her a living, talking, blue-eyed Xanax tablet, which I thought was very romantic. But don't you think
we all have our fantasies.
Exactly. But don't you think that there might be some other reasons why love might make someone less anxious?
Well, it externalizes. I mean, anxiety is a state of being radically obsessed with the self and your own thoughts and your own worries. And it usually prevents love because you're so obsessed with yourself that how could you care about someone else, actually even see anybody else? But meeting and falling in love with my wife, I should say for the second time, because the first time I was a wreck and she dumped me. On a subway platform in Boston. I ask you. And yet, nevertheless, we got back together. And being able to love her and wanting to love her was a way of kind of getting myself out of my own head enough so that I could mitigate the anxiety and live my life. Yeah.
Oh, and you had this great therapist. You had this tiny little revelation, and you say that you're not cured, but really, toward the end of the book, it feels like you've found some peace. And was it really just that conversation, or what else has helped you to do that?
It wasn't that I found peace so much that I found the wisdom that is, I think, the only wisdom that will help anxiety, which is that you have to work at it every single day. I mean, this is a therapist who I would come in and scream at him, just be like, "Help me! Like, do something right now." And he'd be like, "You're not ready." And then eventually, like, this went on for months, and I would just scream at him, and finally I was like, "I just give up. Just tell me, finally, like, let's work." And from that moment forward, he's like, "All right, now, son, I shall tell you." What It's a real jerk. And he, but he finally, it was like he taught me how to be my own therapist, and he taught me the important lesson, which is that you have to do if you're the type of person whose mind works in that way, you're going to have to find the things you need to do every day to beat back those feelings.
And what do you do?
What do I do? Not enough. He was a cognitive behavioral therapist, so the essence of that is mindfulness. Before you experience anxiety, your mind is, you're talking to yourself, you're saying something to yourself. So what he taught me to do was to identify those thoughts. And I still do that. I still, when I'm starting to freak out, I stop and I say, all right, what have you just told yourself? And I will identify that thought and I will question whether it's true or not. He taught me to stop taking my own thoughts as the gospel truth. And I'll do that as a practice as much as I can. And also, I will sit in meditation when I remember to. And those two things, if I do them, really, really help. If I do them every day, and sometimes I don't, I should still.
Yeah. Is it difficult to sort of distrust your own brain a little bit?
You don't know? It is very, I'm not saying because I'm looking at you and you look like that, I'm just saying because most people I think understand what that feels like. Yeah, it's the worst because it's like your single worst enemy is lodged inside your skull. And that is a terrifying feeling.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've actually beat it down as much as you possibly can.
I drink a great deal. I was smoking opium in the green room before I came out here.
You know what?
But
it's,
yes,
it's out there for people to use. You know.
It was next to the donuts.
Yeah.
So I just figured I can do it. Yes, I've done what I can do to try to.
Yeah.
And I think I've gotten far enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the book is very enlightening and funny, and surprisingly funny. You wouldn't think that a memoir about anxiety. The book is Monkey Mind: A Memoir of Anxiety. The author is Daniel Smith. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.